Hi, I'm Michelle, and I'm here with Nick Sconce, who is the author of Hatchet Women, and I have a hard copy, which I really appreciate you sending me, by the way. And
Absolutely.
it's on Amazon right now. I know it's on the Kindle Unlimited. Is it also being sold as a paperback too?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. I thought it was, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just. But you can get it on Kindle Unlimited, which, I appreciate when authors do that. Is there a reason why people go on Kindle Unlimited? Why authors make that decision to do it that way instead of like the $1.99 or, I know I pay for my Kindle Unlimited, you know. So is there a reason that it's a good deal to do that for you?
I don't know how that works. My publisher set that up.
Oh, okay.
She called me and said, "Hey, are you good with unlimited?" And I said, "Yes, I was," just because I think it reaches more people that way, or it becomes more accessible to people.
Yeah, it definitely does.
I'm not. I don't write necessarily for the. Not, I would assume not too many other people do either, but I don't write for financial gain. So to me, it's about getting my stories out there and having people tell me what they think of it. That's where I'm at.
And I have to say, when we connected and you had asked me to read this, I mean, the first chapter hooked me in with Mona, but then I was like, when it started to go on about insurance, I was like, oh, this might be above my pay grade. I may not know like what to do, but I stuck with it, and then the further I got, I was like, when you told me you had another one, I was like, yes. I mean, I think you've alluded in the next one that you're going to keep going. Are you going to keep going?
Absolutely.
Oh my! Because now another author told me that that's the only way they write is like establish these characters and I was like, yeah, that is a good. It's good as long as you can keep it going. Well, this second one, I have to tell you, it's so much better. I'm enjoying it more, maybe because I know them now, which
Sure.
that maybe leads into. But I love Mona so much. Like, she is my favorite character, and in the second one, I think she even shines more.
Yeah. She gets a little bit more scrappy and a little bit more. I don't want to say she finds her footing more, but there's a lot more role clarity in terms of their group dynamic in the second one. And, she knows who she is more as it relates to the group. Mona, as a character, her identity, she knows who she is as a person immediately, but in the group setting, that kind of cements a little bit more than in that second piece.
Yeah, and I have to say, I read a lot. Not as much fiction these days as I used to, but I thought when I first started reading it, I'm like, how am I going to distinguish these four characters apart from each other? I mean, you are so brave to do that, because that is very difficult to take four women and make them so much different and have a voice in their dialogue that now, especially in the second book, I can almost tell who's talking. I don't have to see that, oh, that's Mona saying that. Oh, that's Austin saying that. Like, I could almost tell who's saying what, And that's a very, very difficult thing to do. I believe.
It is, and thank you for telling me that, or giving me that feedback, because I really wanted to challenge myself with this one. One being obviously a man writing about women as four main characters in kind of an ensemble setting. You picked up on something that was very, very challenging, which was making them distinct enough to where, as you come to know the characters and become comfortable with them, you hear their voices. And so I wrote on this for about 2.5 years, and then I put it down for 1.5 years.
Wow.
And then I picked it up and spent another year and change on it before I actually sent the first draft to my publisher. And I'm very blessed with my relationship with my publisher. They're very patient. It's a smaller house, which I like, because then it's not just process and deadline so much.
Right.
But she,
you actually get to know them.
She was very patient. She understood and all that, and so she allowed me that time to do that. But yeah, I wanted to challenge myself in that way, but knowing it's like, oh, I've got four. First of all, again, man writing women is challenging. Had to run a lot of stuff by my wife.
You're like, okay, do women actually say this?
Yeah, it's like,
do they think it or do they say it?
Yeah, do they think, is this a thought? Is this okay? And some things I was pleasantly, I think I was closer than on most things than not. There were a few times she's like, absolutely not, don't do that. Okay, fine. So, but that was a big challenge. And then, like you said, the making their voices different without relying on like an archetype shortcut. And I do that a little bit at the beginning, but then as their characters kind of unfold or blossom a little bit more for the reader, I think that there's some things, nuances that you have to kind of employ early on. And then, that is the biggest, the challenge with the first book in particular is there is a lot of insurance jargon right up front. And on one hand, it is something that, ultimately as an author, I'm asking the reader to stick with or gut out.
Mm-hmm.
The other side of that is, if we go back, let's say somewhere between 50 and 70 years ago, if we were, we in the legal world, that as a setting, law and order, crime, mystery, those types of things, that as a setting has taken 50 to 70 years to develop. And we read a lot of legal jargon now in different books and on TV shows, and we follow it just fine, where that's not really present in this industry. And I think that it's an adjacent industry, and part of that was to get people to realize how fraud actually works in insurance and how some of this stuff happens on a daily basis. Yes, it's a work of fiction, but a lot of the stories there are very, very rooted in reality and in my past experience. So there was a little bit of championing going on there with me. It's like, I know I'm kind of heavy here on some language, but over time, like you said, you had alluded to with the second back base slings, I don't use as much there. I don't think I have to, but it's also something that becomes, I'm hoping it becomes more germane to the reader.
I definitely feel like I learned a lot. I don't even want to say that I have mastered everything you're talking about, but I definitely, taking, me as a reader, as somebody who knew nothing, okay, I definitely feel like, okay, well, I learned stuff while I was reading it that I did not know about. And I, in a former life, was a legal secretary, so I do have a lot of experience in law, in law firm. And I think that's why I enjoyed those women so much, being who they were, and in the first book, kind of having to fight for what they deserved, and I love that the cover has them as blondes.
Yeah.
And I have to say, you just sent me the other one, and I'm like 30 pages from the end. I tried this morning to finish it, but it's just a page turner. Last night I was like, I gotta go to sleep. So I really found that the second one I just enjoyed more, kind of just because, I know them a little bit more,
Yeah.
but it's a terrific storyline. The second one is a terrific storyline, but I don't want to know how it ends. So
okay, I won't tell you how.
I'm going to figure it out tonight. But what I always wanted to know from authors, and this is why I kind of created this, is because I always have questions. Like, I remember when Oprah interviewed J.K. Rowling, and I think she was like the only person to ever like sit down with her and say, "How did you do this?" And then J.K. Rowling like pulls out her notebooks and like lays them out on a table and
Yep.
And shows them to her. And that's what I wanted to know. It's like, okay, you have a concept, like what you want to do, but how do you create, like, in an outline, or do you just think of them? Like, how do you create these 4 women and then to know what you want them to accomplish? Like, what is your process as an author that you go through?
I thank you for that. I appreciate you asking. In a broader sense, I come up with a storyline, or something will be a seed of a storyline, and I'll spend a lot of time thinking about it before I even start making notes or character sketches or outlines or any kind of ink to paper or the electronic equivalent, I'll spend on average probably about 6 months just thinking of a story. To give you an example, a current example, I'm on the 4th storyline now for the Hatchet women, meaning that I'm about to start the 4th storyline.
Wow.
And I know how I want to start that, and I want to start that going into a deep dive in Austin's background and her family life.
That would be awesome.
I know where I want to go with it, but I've been thinking about that first chapter for about 4 months.
Wow.
And I haven't written a word on it. And a lot of that is I'm really auditory as a thinker or as an information processor, and so I employ a lot of music to kind of inform me from a mood in a directional sense, not necessarily thematic or but so so last night I'm driving home and I'm listening to Heart, and I always try to find music that, at least for me, is the character, is the embodiment of a character.
Right.
And so I was listening to Heart because, for a lot of reasons, that for me, and I don't want to influence or prejudice someone in terms of their thoughts on any of my characters like Austin, but Austin is Heart. If she were music, she would be the music of Heart. Mm-hmm. And so I'm listening to a lot of that because it's informing me, it's getting me into the right frame of mind to be her voice. Mm-hmm. And so I use music that way. So that's the first step for me. In particular with Hatchet Women, the idea originated from, again, my wife. We were watching TV one night, and that McDonald's Monopoly game comes on. They do that like twice a year, and it is the grand prize is, if you get Park Place and Boardwalk, you get $1 million, right? They give you $1 million. Well, it's not really. If you read the fine print, it's not $1 million. It is 20 payments of $50,000, 20 annual payments of $50,000. And so she was asking me, she's like, well, what happens if you win, but you don't live for the 20 years? What happens to the rest of the payments? And I said, well, contractually, it's up to McDonald's to either, have you sign a contract that says that they'll give those to your beneficiaries or your loved ones or continue those payments or not. Technically, they don't have to pay you. It's an award. It's, they don't have any legal right to pay you or recourse that forces them to. So let's say that you are in it for 5 payments and then you pass away untimely. Very technically and legally, they can say, well, sorry, that's it. Right. And so that's what she said. So what's to stop a company from awarding $1 million and then having you killed?
Mm-hmm. And you were
that's where the brain, that's where it all kicked off. And so from there, then I always seek to challenge myself. One of the things that I did with this one in particular is I did not use any curse words or foul language in this. In some of my other books, the characters are very foul-mouthed. And so I wanted that to be kind of more of a grammatical challenge for myself. Not that it's a huge challenge not to cuss, but in some intense situations, you do feel like, well, maybe throwing one out here or there is okay, or sprinkling them in. So I always try to set a grammatical challenge. I'm sorry, what?
I said I picture Mona cursing every once in a while.
Yeah. Okay, good, because that's particularly with Mona, that's very challenging to write, to commit to not using curse words, right? So, so that was a challenge I set, and then I really wanted to. I have, this notion of, and I'm going to say this, and it's become an unfortunate cliche, but I have daughters, and I wanted to contribute to creating strong, fictionalized but strong female role models for my children. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people say, well, something happens that is chauvinistic or sexist, and then it gets into the news. And the reaction from most men is, well, I have daughters and I have a wife. Well, the reality is everyone on the planet has some relationship to a woman. It's not like we're that separate, men and women, those types of things. So that's a cliche, but at the same time, I wanted to. Now they're younger. Mm-hmm. They're still in grade school, so I do not allow them to at this point in time read my work. Mm-hmm. But I do hope someday that they will want to. I'm not going to force it on them, but I wanted to give them an example of strong characters, but also to remind them that workplace sexism is a very real thing. I think there's ebb and flow to it, but it has not gone away. It has not been eradicated. And I wanted to encapsulate, in a broad sense, the sexism that I have encountered as a hiring manager, trying to hire women at the same pay as men and getting pushback on that, and really having to take my superiors to task on a lot of things to get equal pay for women. I've experienced that. I've experienced just other forms of day-to-day discrimination between that women encounter. I say I experience it. I've witnessed it. I obviously couldn't experience. I'm not the perpetrator of it by any means, but I wanted to, at least put somewhat of a timestamp on. This is the way it was when your mom and dad were in this part of their work life, just so that they can have that reminder. And I also wanted to do it from the perspective of a man witnessing it and seeing the wrong in it and wanting to do something about it and doing things in the real world about it, like fighting for, no, I'm going to pay her what I pay him, and you're going to approve that. And I don't even know why you're asking. This is ridiculous type stuff. So that was part of it too. So throw all that into a pot, turn on the heat, and start stirring it around. And that's what became these characters. Now, from a character standpoint, then I use a lot of music to kind of give me the soul of my character. And from there, then I start to I look at it, a lot of what I do is like additive sculpture, to where I don't start with a block of clay and then whittle down. I add things in to make the perspective on the character. And so that's where over time, it's like, oh, that'd be good for her, or that'd be good for this character, or this reference point will help further identify this character. And so that all just kind of comes into the brainstorming flow for me. And then ultimately, I have to legitimize that somehow, right? You can't just, the type of writing I do, I can't just create absolutely fantastic characters that have all these quirky flaws, but also great characteristics from a heroic sense. So I have to ground that in realism a little bit. I did take a lot of license with Mona, and she's a great character. She, I don't want to sound presumptuous by any means, but Shakespeare kind of wrote himself into a corner with the character of Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet, because he realized, I think, in the research that I've done by Act 2 of writing Romeo and Juliet, that Mercutio was stealing the show. And so that's why he had to write, or he felt that he had to write Mercutio out through Tybalt, I think, was the one that killed him. And I don't want to equate myself to Shakespeare by any means. I'm not the arbitrator of, the new modern English or anything like that. But in my way, and I told that to my publisher, I said, Mona is my Mercutio, because if I allow her to, she will run with this whole thing. She'll take over everything. And that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for fans of that character, because I think I have a high level of consumption with Mona as a character. And I think a lot of readers might too, because she's easy to relate to. She's one of those characters that, there are people in your real life that are this way, that when you think of them, you automatically start smiling, and they just bring that out in you for whatever reasons. It might be humor, it might be joy or love. But Mona is a character that I like. I like saying this about her, is that when I think of her, I start to smile. It's not because I'm emotionally attached to her. It's just she's just a great character. So
yeah, and I think that
sorry about that.
That's okay. I think that what when women read this, what they'll see is that there's a little bit of us in every character, and now I'm not like Mona, but then I look at Mona and go, oh, I wish I was more like her. Like I wish I was that aggressive and that, sure of myself. But, and then I look, I'm like, oh, I'm probably more like Becca or Austin, but I like, but then Edie has her, like, I mean, she's awesome. So it's like I take all of those characters and I see a little bit, so I feel like we're, in different percentages, we're kind of all, But I also found what's interesting too, and I'm probably older than you, but in my day, like back when I was in my 20s and working and having children and working, and as a married mom and then as a single mom, it's amazing to me that, I had to justify working. And then I just had to justify when I stopped working to stay at home with the kids. And now my daughters are in their 20s, and my one daughter is a mom, and she still has that battle. It isn't gone, maybe not to the same degree, but she still has it. She's pulled. Should I stay at home with my little kids? Should I be at work? Should I, and I always tell her, like, there's not, it's just difficult for us as moms, and none of these women are moms, but they have their battles. But it's just interesting to me that because they are starting to talk about, like, well, what do you want? Well, what do you want? And that's, as women, that's what we say. Well, what do you want? As if there's this one thing. What are we going to decide to do? And I always just tell my daughters, like, the kids grow up. You got to be your person. It's so easy to fall into mom.
Yes.
That's natural. But then, when they start leaving and you're like, let's see, everybody that was a legal secretary with me is now paralegals and they're doing other it was very difficult, as I got older and realized that. Not that I regret it, but that's what I guess I'm seeing in these women is like, I see their struggle. I see, they want to expand, they want to work more. But then they're like, well, what if we work more? Then this consumes us. And then what do we have? And I don't know that men have that same kind of struggle is what I'm saying. And you're really good in articulating it. That struggle.
Thank you. I'm glad you picked that up too. I again, my wife is, she's my toughest critic, but she's also my fiercest champion. And I've gotten to the point that I don't write without her. Mm-hmm. And she's not a writer. She doesn't want to be a writer. It's not that I'm taking that over for both of us by any means, but she does inform me in ways that I probably don't come right out and tell her as much as I probably should. But one of those is what we're talking about here is, with the birth of our three children, I saw it three different times and three different iterations, because my wife loves her work, but she loves staying home with the kids, and it is a co-equal struggle. I think it's like 50-50. Some days could be more challenging than others, but it was a dead heat. And with our first daughter, it was a real struggle for her to go back to work. But once she got there, she really thrived, loved the adult interaction, but also felt as though she was. The problem is we as society we make women feel less than if they, regardless of what they choose, they feel less than for the other choice that they didn't make. Right. And that's real. And so with our second daughter, when she was born, we were at a point where it was easier for her to make, financially, it was easier for her to make the decision or the choice. Do you want to stay home? Do you want to? And so she chose for a period to stay home with both daughters at that point, when they were really young. Mm-hmm. And then they got to a point where she's like, yeah, I think I want to go back to work. And that opened a whole nother can of worms from the standpoint of she really felt and was made to feel as though she was starting over. And she was out of the workforce for 2.5 years. So not a whole lot of time.
But technology.
But in terms of what the job that she was able to get, the amount of pay she was able, it was. Now we had a geographic move at that time too, so that factored in a little bit. But she went from, I think it was right at 40% of where she was at prior to her staying home with our daughters. That's what she came back into the workforce at, 40%. Yeah. And those are things that, that's a very personal story, but that's real.
It
And
is real.
that's
It's
again
real.
another issue that people like to say is a women or woman's issue. No, that's just all of our issue, because regardless, just take the gender away from it. One stays home and then returns to the workforce at 40 cents on the dollar for what they were making, let alone the 70 cents on the dollar they were making as compared to their counterparts. So that's a discount on top of a discount. That affects the family. That affects everybody. That's not just a woman's issue to me. So I'm glad you hit upon that, because as the storyline goes, that's going to become more and more of a discussion between the women. And like you said, they ask each other, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
And some of them appear to have it figured out much more than others. Time will tell whether or not they actually do. But the flip side of that coin is that while there is challenge in choice and from being made to feel less than for the choice you don't make, the flip side of that coin is for men, it's not even a thought process or a decision-making process, let alone a choice. You just go back to work.
I know, what are you going to do? The baby's born. Oh, I think I'll stay home. No, you don't stay home.
Yeah, it's like, okay, well, let me know. And then you trot on off back to work. And so that's the other side of that, is that we need to arrive, I feel, at a point where those decisions have an equal amount of weight for men and women.
Right.
And one, so that men can develop a greater appreciation of that, but also so that they have the same amount of choice that women make. And choice doesn't necessarily, I think we hear the word choice and there's a positive connotation. Well, at least you get to choose. At least you have a choice to make. Well, choice isn't necessarily always a good thing. I mean, if you're having to make really tough choices, it can be a burden and or a curse. And so I look at that both ways. I think men should have to be at the table there, both to enjoy but also to struggle with that choice. And then I think that women should be applauded and further supported in the absolute difficulty of making those types of life choices. Edie is a character that, I think in her mind, she is more concerned with. She could dive into this career and look up 30 years later and think, who am I? Where have I gone? And what do I have to show for it other than a pretty good bank account, right?
Right.
Or net worth. And I think that's her concern, is that she knows that she is so passionate about this work that she could miss out on the stuff that you really that creates meaning in life. It's that old cliche again, but nobody on their deathbed says, gee, I wish I could have put in a couple more hours a week at work.
Yes.
No one says that, right? So that's her concern. With Austin, I think Austin, she is deep down afraid of how much she can love and how much she wants to love, not necessarily needs to love, although that's a component, but wants to love. And she's a much more free spirit. And I think that her concern is the opposite of Edie's, or a counterbalance that, man, do I really want to do this? I just want to go and find and create my happiness, and work is a means to an end. It is not my identity. It is not who I am. I just want it to be consistent and stable enough to allow me to be me. And then Becca.
Becca, I don't feel like I know in this one as much. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. So go ahead, tell me what Becca, I want to hear what Becca thinks, because
Becca
she's
is
not here for this
my most challenging character.
Yeah.
Of the four, because she's very analytical, and it's hard to flesh that out for me. And I'm very analytical, so it's kind of like, how do I flesh out that character?
She's like the brains, right? I mean, she's really like technical
yeah,
brains.
She's very technical. She's kind of the brains of the operation from just an absolute, here's how we get stuff done.
Right.
And she's very guarded, even within the group, with her more personal nature. And I've decided to it's a slow build, but to allow that to come more to the forefront. So you see more assertiveness from Becca in back base slings, and that's the start of that, to where I do want her to be at the same table in terms of, well, what do we want and how do we want it, and or what do I want, and in what order, or to what degree in a personal setting. So I'm going to develop more for her as time goes on, but it's going to be because she is so guarded, and it's not that she doesn't trust her coworkers and her friends in this team. It's just that she feels it's unnecessary. She's an introverted person forced into an extroverted world, and it's not that she doesn't trust them. It's just that she doesn't trust empathy, and she doesn't trust when people appear to be interested in her life. She thinks it's all social or societal window dressing, and a lot of introverts are that way. It's like, when someone says, if you're an introvert and someone says, how are you? They don't really want to know. It's just that the words they say to fill the silence and the awkwardness. It's the first time that day, right?
Right.
So that's Becca. She has a distrust of true human intent. And again, not from a defensive or hurt standpoint, but from an analytical standpoint. It's like, you don't really care how I am. What if I unloaded all this horrible stuff about my life on you in the elevator? You don't really want to know that. You want me to say, oh, fine, I'm doing great, thanks for asking, and that's it. So what's the point? And so anyway, that's kind of Becca's world. And I'll develop that
I can't wait to get to know her better, as a character. Like, I was thinking that only because right now in where I'm at, the three of them are separate from her at the moment.
Yes.
So,
And I wanted to do that too. I wanted to divide them. Sorry, something popped up on my computer. Sorry.
I can't see it.
Okay. I wanted to divide them up to create relief. And from a standpoint for Becca, that whole notion of, if you love something, let it go and see if it comes back to you. So in a certain sense, Edie is doing that with Becca. I love you and I want you on my team, but I respect you enough to let you go. And I want you to come to me and it be your decision. And for Becca, it gives her that space. And she's not a character that needs space to go prove herself to everybody or to herself. She just needs space for the sake of space.
Right.
And so I wanted that. Now, I've already written the third one. So, to Michelle, the way I envision this is full-length novel, novella for the second piece, Base Slings. Third is a full-length novel. Fourth is a novella, and then the fifth and final element or piece of it will be a full-length novel. And I have those storylines vetted out now with my publisher. The third, I don't mind sharing. I tackle Medicare and Medicare fraud.
Awesome.
And so I insert in. It's nice because the story arc is they start in a company. They start to debate whether or not they should go independent and create their own company, and how would that work. And then by the third, they're on to more contractual work.
Nice.
And they have kind of a presence in the industry at large. And so they get hired, and it's a much smaller story, similar to Base Slings. It's a much smaller story and setting, but I wanted to uncover the vast amount of fraud.
No, I think
deception.
that'll be and especially for this time, and I think that'd be really important, to hear about, especially for me. Like, I don't know that much. Like I said, I've learned more about this stuff just from the first novel. The second one's a little easier to understand only because of the first. And I highly suggest everybody read the first only because you get to know them. I think if you're going to dive right into the second, you can, but it's not, to me, doesn't make it as full of a story. So I really do suggest for anybody out there who are like, oh, I just want to go to the second, just start with the first, and you'll be happy you did. It's an excellent story. And, the one question I always want to ask authors is, And okay, so you read on Amazon those books that are like, write a book in 24 hours, make $1 million by the end of the month, sell it on, and I'm like, and I've always been a writer, not an author, more just, and I have stuff up here, but I never could get it down. And it's like, is that even possible? Like to think about 24 hours to get a novel as complex and as interesting to read as this book is. Do you believe?
If you can capture lightning in a bottle, great. I don't think so, and I don't really feel that for the type of stories I want to share, it's possible for me. I won't speak in general for all
people.
Writers.
But still, I think about it. Okay, they're like hour one, think of a story.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
If you don't already have something, you're not going to.
Okay, I'll just set my timer for an hour and think of.
Yeah. I see some of that. We had. I got invited to a panel here locally for National Novel Writing Month in one of the libraries here in the Oklahoma City area, and there were a lot of questions around that too. Part of the panel, they kind of put me out there as the traditional novel writing author. They didn't call me old school, thankfully. But there were some other folks in that panel that did a lot more online work for hire.
Don't get a publisher. That's another one. I mean, you have a publisher, but a lot of people are just self-publishing them right out there, not editing. I've seen a lot of stuff on Kindle Unlimited, not edited. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of, we're in an interesting time. I think it's been fascinating. I've been published for about 6 years now, and I think even a few years before that, where publishing was becoming a lot more digital, a lot more ebook oriented versus hard copy. I think there's generational elements. I still like holding a book. I like the visceral experience of flipping pages, and
right, me too.
And the left side of the book gets thicker as you go, and there's a physical element to that.
Absolutely.
That's going away. Hopefully it won't go entirely away. I don't believe it will.
I don't think so anymore. I used to think that, but I don't think so anymore.
I don't either. I think there's enough people that appreciate that part of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, with electronic publishing and self-publishing, it has become a little bit of the Wild West. Another lady on this panel did a lot of romance novel writing, and she was describing the formula, and here's how you get paid, and I support myself on my romance writing under a pen name, and then what she said is I take it seriously writing, I write under a different name, and I publish that through a publisher. I self-publish, or I just do contract work for so she was kind of a center spectrum. I was, old school traditional. She was center spectrum, and then there was someone else on the panel that was pure self-published, didn't have an editor, refused to have an editor, was really more looking for pure reader response, and building audience from that perspective. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I will say there should be an element of buyer beware.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is if you go the traditional route of publishing, you have been vetted.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody other than you
has read it.
Has put their stamp or their seal of approval or their endorsement, their tacit endorsement by agreeing to publish you.
Mm-hmm.
And you've gone through the gauntlet of not only getting projects green-lighted with your publisher, sending sample chapters, keeping them updated, having them come back and say, no go, this isn't saleable, it's not happening, you need to change this or that. Then going through the editing process where, I do a lot of self-editing before I even send it to the editor, because I feel like I can achieve a level of detachment from my works enough to do a fair amount of that. But then sending it to the editor, getting it back, and then the absolute worst, which is line editing, which is the very last form of editing prior to it going to print. And it's not so much typo editing, but that's an element of it, but just line editing for consistency, which is just, it's so painful, but it's necessary. You go through all that when you are traditionally published, and your novel as a product, because that's what it is. It's a product meant for consumption, your product is better for it. Now, I'm not trying to take away anything from folks that self-publish. If they have the discipline to do those things, I mean, these are things that have developed over centuries in the world of publishing. This is not something that somebody came up with just, out of the blue. This has been the development of the human endeavor of publishing works of fiction and nonfiction for centuries.
Right.
So to throw that out on its ear and say, go for it, self-publish, okay, fine, do it. If you have the discipline for it, excellent, great, but there should be an element of buyer beware when it comes to the consumption of goods and the cost of goods and services, right? So anyway, Michelle,
I'm sure
you got to learn to tell me to shut up because I go and go.
No, I get both sides. I really do. I understand the frustration of trying to get a publisher or trying to get somebody to read your stuff. I get that, and it is so easy to put it out there. But there is something to the editing and the, having another eye and being, if you miss something or if you start going off, like somebody pulls you back and says, I think it helps. I think it helps the story. I think you can tell. I really do. But I do understand the frustration. I do I do get that there are authors that are like, I just want to put it out there. I just want to keep writing. And then that's their decision if that's how they want to, figure it out. But I do just, I guess when I read those 24-hour things, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I couldn't do it.
I think that we're writers and authors are an element of the entertainment industry.
Mm-hmm.
But we also are the part of the industry that doesn't have the pressure of being forever young. We're not in front of the camera.
Right.
We don't have the pressure of, getting something out there because of its relevance or timeliness necessarily as much as other elements of the entertainment industry, whether that's TV or movies or music. I say that because this is my third and fourth novel that has been published. I have 8 that will never see the light of day. And those were, when I was writing them, I wanted them to see the light of day. But as time goes on, you get a sense of what is saleable and what isn't necessarily saleable. But that doesn't mean that you didn't become a better writer for the endeavor. And, writers historically get better as the further, the more they write, the longer their life experiences become, they get better at their craft. And I've gotten to a point in my writing where I see that. I can go back to some stuff. I started writing when I was in high school, and I look back at that, and it's cringe. It creates cringe, but it's also, that's where I was at the time. And with the great bands or the great actors and actresses or the great movie makers, you can do that too. I mean, look at The Color Purple or Schindler's List from Spielberg versus Jaws, and Jaws is considered a great movie, but it was one of his first, and there are some significant flaws.
Right.
Look at how much he's developed as the craftsman of his medium. So that's the other thing that I think that, we all have this emotional tie of wanting to get our creative baby into the world, and you have that emotional attachment to it. But that doesn't mean that everyone else will have the same emotional attachment. And quite frankly, they won't.
Right.
You love your novels. You love them like you love a child at first. The difference is a real child you continue to love forever. For your novels,
you're like,
you create a healthy detachment. You have to. So when I do a first draft, I will finish it and I will shelve it for 6 months. I will not take a look at it. I will not send it to my publisher. I will forget it, and it's literally to cleanse my mind of it to where I can come back and be detached and objective, because that's the right thing for the work. It's hard for me to do, but it's what the work needs. And I think that's just, I'm a little bit more on the traditional side of the spectrum, obviously, but you have to have those as a professional, you have to have those disciplines, those self-disciplines, in order, if you're truly passionate, if you're in this for the long game, you just have to have those elements. And it's the same as, I don't read a book about how to build a car and then turn around and start building a car.
Right.
It ain't going to run. It's going to be a danger to everybody around.
Watch a little YouTube channel.
Right? So,
but what do you do in that 6-month period of time? So you put that away, right? And do you just
I go live life.
You don't write?
Anything.
Oh, okay.
I go live life. I stop being a writer for 6 months. I take a break. I just go and be the other parts of being me. And,
even for this series, like you took the same kind of break for each one of. Interesting. Yep. Well, when can we see the second one on Amazon?
The second one is I'm going to run just a free on Amazon for that close to Christmas. To like the free download, the Kindle, because the second one is it is not in hard copy at all, because it's only about 145 pages, I think. So I'm going to run that as a free, and then I think we're just going to. That one will always be free, so I just need to get it through my publisher to be out there. Okay. What we wanted to do is put the first one out, similar to what you said, put the first one out, allow that to be accessible, and then put the second one out fairly close, so within the next month or so, and that will always just be a free download or a free Kindle, or I sent you the PDF version of it, but in any way. And so even on my website, I'll have it there on the different formats, so people can go there too, outside of Amazon, because it is free. So there's no purchasing of it, I guess.
Well, I just wanted to be able to talk to you again after I read the second and third. I mean, I'm almost done with the second one. So when we get to the third one, then we can do this. Then we can talk more about, these girls and where they, these women and where they're ending up, because I really do. I really love it. It's amazing work, and I'm really happy that you brought that out for everybody.
Thank you so much. It means a lot hearing that from you, Michelle. Writing is a lonesome and a lonely, but also in a good way, and I mean that in all the positive connotation. It's a lonely endeavor. It's a bold, very solo endeavor. And there's good and bad to that.
Right.
The bad
is
isolate until a reader or until somebody comes back and tells you what they think. Sometimes you do feel like you're just kind of floating in a bubble in the vacuum of, am I just totally off my rocker? am I hitting anywhere near the target on this? Those things. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And it was great talking to you. And here is the book again. And you can get it on Amazon. And I will post all the links to all your stuff underneath there. And thank you so much for talking to me about it. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Bye.